Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to look at the Cities Without Number and Shadowrun 4E bundles of holding. Arcane Library's newsletter has some really cool stuff going on and a Kickstarter in 2025. We're going to look at various RPG products and system reference documents that are available in Markdown so that you can drop them into Obsidian. We're also going to look at the high value of the Obsidian Web Clipper. I have a new little gift for you for the holiday season, a new dice roller that I built yesterday. I want to show that off. Today's big topic is going to be the notable sections of the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. And we're going to cover more questions from the December 2024 Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. The Lazy RPG Talk Show is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to all kinds of awesome tools, tips, tricks, adventures, and things like that. An example of like a tool that patrons get access to is the Forge of Foes 5e Monster Stats tool. You pick a monster of any particular challenge rating. You want to get a challenge rating 3 monster. You want some quick stats. You have a set of quick stats, including a one-line stat block you can grab and throw right into your notes. This is all based off the Forge of Foes math. Very simple tool. This is just one of probably more than a half a dozen little web apps I've been developing. And the cool bit is it's one single web page. You can download the whole tool to your desktop and keep it so you don't have to ever worry about it. And it's all available. And it includes a bunch of, if you want a bunch of different potential status effects to throw on the monster or different monster features that you want to tie on, that's all available here. So this is just one example. Other examples are like the Sly Flourish random generator, where you can generate random monuments and things like that. So lots of different tools, but also lots of adventures. One of the things I'm working on there is a set of new scenarios for the City of Arches that are available to Hero Tier subscribers. There's a whole other podcast that's available to patrons of Sly Flourish. So the patrons of Sly Flourish get lots of really awesome stuff. And most of all, patrons help me put on shows like this. To the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you so much for your outstanding support. As I've mentioned before, bundles of holding are probably the best way to get access to bundles of holding, and humble bundles are the best deals in tabletop role-playing games, as long as you're okay with digital products. If you're good with PDFs, if you're good with reading PDFs, using them on tablets and things like that, definitely the bundles of holding and humble bundles give you the best deal. I talk about them almost every week. We have a bundle of holding or a humble bundle. Today, we have two different ones that are out there. The first one is Cities Without Number. Cities Without Number is an RPG made by Kevin Crawford, along with like Worlds Without Number and Stars Without Number. Really cool kind of old school style role-playing games, but particularly known for their incredible world building tools that they have. Cities Without Number is a cyberpunk-based system, and you can pick it up $8. It's $8. I think it's for if you want this one's just $8. Like you get the whole version of Cities Without Number, which includes a PDF and an EPUB version. Oh man. So we're going to talk a little bit about like more RPG products being in Markdown, but I am a huge fan of EPUBs, and I really wish, if you're a publisher out there, please consider putting your stuff out in EPUB. And the reason why is that PDFs suck on phones. They suck on a phone. Try reading a PDF on a phone. It sucks. So instead, EPUB formats to your phone. EPUB is essentially like an encapsulated HTML version of a product, a linked encapsulated version. It has artwork in there. You can do tables in there. You can do all the normal stuff that you can do. Only it is responsive design for your phone. And I go through the trouble myself. I'm lucky that in my careers, I've worked with a lot of web page stuff. For me to make EPUBs is actually not too terrible an experience. I can do it on my own, which means almost all of the Sly Flourish books are available in EPUB. That any of them that we could make in EPUB, we made in EPUB, and are available along with the PDF version. I really wish more people would make it. Yes, and also highly accessible. So screen readers have a much easier time reading EPUB than they do with heavily formatted PDFs. You can bump up font sizes. So for people with vision that still have some vision but have trouble with it, they can bump, and for us old folks that now have to wear the glasses, we can bump the font sizes up to whatever font size works for us on the device that we're working on. So it's a far more accessible format. So hey, publishers, be more like Kevin Crawford. Put out your stuff in EPUB. It's hard. It's costly. I get it. It's worth doing because it makes your product so much more accessible. So consider EPUB. Cities Without Number, very much like other Kevin Crawford RPGs, old school style, very simple. And I don't know how many people play the RPG, vice use it for world building activities, but the world building stuff that exists there, the vast amounts of tables and really interesting ways to kind of like roll I really like this one. Like for all of the different encounters, I was reading this. I was like, man, this is a really cool style of writing like one page, one paragraph adventures, where not only does it tell you, what are the examples that they have here? EFC, T, and P, which stand for what? Enemies, friends, complications, things, and places. Very specific sort of tags that you can tie to any given location. Really cool way of doing it. I love this idea a lot. Like it really focuses you in on what are the specific things you want. Fantastic. This is just one example of the kind of stuff that Kevin puts in his products. Really great work and awesome. A couple of other very cool things. If the $8 is too much, you can get the free version available on DriveThruRPG. It's a slimmed down version, no art version. I guess it has art. This is the free version, and here it is. And his intention is very much make it so that you can send it to your players so that your players can use it too. You know, that's one big thing with RPGs is I think the demand, you know, whether it should be this way or not is not really the question. The question is players who are not always into an RPG as much as us GMs are probably not super eager to drop $30 every time you're like, hey, I would like to try out a new game. So having a free version that you can send to them that they can use, again, like the quick start rules for Shadowdark, like the SRD for D&D, for all of these different things that you can kind of send out to people so they can get an idea of how the game works. That's fantastic. The free version is here as well. Not only that, he has a Cities Without Number system reference document, which is mostly about the mechanics to play the game, that he not only released under Creative Commons license, but released under CC0, which means there are no restrictions at all. You can use this. Essentially, CC0 is waiving the copyright to something. There's no limitations on what you can do with it at all. You can copy the text directly. You can derive, modify, or do anything you want with it. You can publish your own products, and you don't even need to say where it came from, right? That if it came from here, you don't even need to say where it came from. You probably should, because it's a nice thing to do. That would be like the equivalent of a Creative Commons attribution license, but it's not even, which is a very, very, this is CC0, the entire game and all the stuff in it. His argument for it is he believes mechanics should not be copywritten anyway, and this is all mechanics. So therefore, he's putting away the CC0 version. Fantastic stuff. Totally worth the $8. And you can pick that up on the bundle of holdings. $7.95 for the complete City of Arches book, which includes all the stuff that I just showed. Character sheets, the main book, the free version, the system reference document, EPUB version, all of that. There's even a text version in here. All of that is available under that single $8. Really, really good deal. I highly recommend it. Shadowrun, I only found this out this morning. I somehow missed it, but Shadowrun also has a bundle of holding going on right now. A much bigger bundle of holding. $18 gives you all the core Shadowrun stuff, and then there's a mega bonus collection that's based on the threshold price, which is, what's the threshold price? Threshold price is currently $33, so not super cheap, but a lot of stuff, a lot of products. I haven't really played or run Shadowdark, and I haven't picked this up yet. I probably will, though, because if there's ever an opportunity, if you ever like, you know, one day I'm going to want to check out Shadowrun, now's the time. Because, like, you know, $33 for this number of PDFs, like, look at all the PDFs you get. Tons and tons of stuff that you get for it. And even if you only want the main collection just to get the core of Shadowrun, which is probably what I'll do. I don't know if I need all of it, but I would probably get the $18 version. So I'll have all of the core of Shadowrun, because why not? $18, right? For the entire RPG plus all the other stuff. That's a really low price. It's a really good deal. So those are two bundles of holding that you probably want to check out. Arcane Library, our friends over at Arcane Library. There's Kelsey Dione, the creator of Shadowdark. Arcane Library is her store, and the Arcane Library has a newsletter. You usually get it by scrolling up and down on the page and it pops up, but if you can't get it, there's also a join the newsletter button here. And on the newsletter, you get notifications of all the stuff she does, but Kelsey often gives away a lot of stuff for free through the newsletter. So it's totally worth signing up. But two things that she just added to the newsletter are two free adventures available for it. One is called Doom of the Red Wastes, which is a 10-page adventure for what level characters here? Is it fourth level Shadowdark adventure? Looks really cool. I mean, just, you know, it doesn't matter what, it looks really great, right? And a nice slim adventure, as you imagine, coming from the pen of Kelsey Dione. But it's free. Sign up for the newsletter. Get a hold of it. right? Find a link down in the show notes to go to the Arcane Library website. Go to the website, click on that newsletter button, join the newsletter with your email address, and you too will get these free. You'll get these free adventures. I haven't even really looked at these yet. Raiders of the Hidden Temple is another 4th level. So 2 4th level adventures that you can drop into your game. And these are very reskinnable to other systems too. So if for whatever reason you're not running Shadowdark, you don't feel like you want to play it in Shadowdark, you'd rather run it in any kind of other OSR-based game or 5e, you can certainly easily, hey look, serpent people. I actually just ran a whole serpent person encounter in my game. I should have grabbed this. Oh well, here we are. Really cool maps, right? Good looking stuff. So that is available from Arcane Library. You're going to have 3 new Cursed Scroll books available for Arcane Library for Shadowdark. So that I'm very excited to see. I'm excited to see what comes out. I think those Cursed Scrolls were awesome little zines, and I'm excited to see the kind of stuff that she's got coming in the future. So that if you want to find out about that, the best way to do so is to subscribe to the Arcane Library newsletter and learn all about it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today, I just gave my giant rant about EPUB and that I wish more publishers would publish into EPUB. However, there might be another system that is almost as accessible and actually could be as accessible as EPUB that I'm starting to see gain more traction than EPUB is, and that's Markdown. If you're not familiar with Markdown, Markdown is a very simple syntax for writing a text-based product. I'll give an example. This is a little secret. Let's see if this works, because sometimes it doesn't work. Here's a little secret. Every one of the Sly Flourish articles that I write are written in Markdown. And this is an example of a document in Markdown. You can see it uses like double pound signs for headers. It has a very basic link format of brackets and parens for links. For strongs and italicize, you can use like double stars. There's a very simple syntax for Markdown. And it's been now around for quite a while. It's a format originally developed by an Apple developer named John Gruber and has expanded out into all areas of the internet. Markdown is particularly important as a format because, and here's how, like these are reference links. Like this is an example of a bunch of links that I have. So all of my articles are written in Markdown first and then rendered into HTML to go up on the web. Markdown also can be viewed natively in tools like Notion and Obsidian, which means if you have a Markdown document, you can drop that Markdown document into Obsidian and view it directly. You can also copy and paste it, a Markdown document, into Notion and view it in Notion, and it will render correctly where the headers and the strongs and the links and all of that will work. So I'm starting to see more RPG products support Markdown. The ones that caught my attention recently, I'm actually going to switch over to my Obsidian view here. That some of the ones that have come out recently are the works of Raging Swan. So Dread Thingonomicon by Raging Swan has a whole bunch of different MD files, and you can view these Markdown files, as you can see, in Obsidian directly, and they scale and they flex. And if you've got Obsidian on your phone, you can view it on your phone. It formats nicely. It also makes it easy to like copy and paste stuff into other parts of your notes. So if you find something that you like, that you want, if you find one of these encounters on the wrecked ship and you want to drop it into your notes, you can copy and paste the text directly from here and drop it into your notes. Way easier than trying to deal with monkeying around with a PDF. Dread Thingonomicon does that. Dread Lairnomicon does that. So this is something that Raging Swan kind of embraced, that he was putting out documents in text and eventually kind of switched to Markdown. And I was like, if you just make them .mds, you can drop them right into Obsidian. By the way, you might find that. You might find that you get text versions of stuff that you want to drop in here. If you just change it from .txt to .md and drop it in, a lot of tools can let you like auto do it for a bunch of files. Apple, for example, you can say, turn all of these .text files I select into Markdown files, and it'll do that. And that way you can drop them right into Obsidian, which uses .md as their format. There's probably a way in Markdown also, or in Obsidian, to tell it open text files as though they're Markdown, and that works too. So a couple of other interesting ones. So if you go to slyflourish.com, I have a couple of Lazy GM resource documents. These are parts of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, the workbook, the companion, and Forge of Foes that we have released under a Creative Commons license. It's under a Creative Commons attribution license, and we have HTML versions of these. So big, long documents that have lots of different things that you can use. random tables, difficulty dials, lots of different, some of this is just advice, but then you'll also see that we have tables and things like that in here. And it's all available in Markdown. A Crit-Tech, a patron of Sly Flourish, actually put together an automated GitHub repo for this that converts these documents into a bunch of different formats, including EPUB. So again, these documents are available in EPUB, but also available as Obsidian Markdown documents. So right here, and there's links to all this in the show notes. But if you go, you can get there pretty easily by going to Sly Flourish, going to LazyGM's resource document, and at the bottom there's Crit-Tech's LGMRD GitHub repo. You click on that, and you can see these Obsidian versions of the chapters from the LazyGM's resource document are available in Markdown. There again, we can go back to Obsidian, and for example, meant I could use them, right? So I have the LazyGM resource document right here, and it's got a lot of stuff. So if I want to look at, for example, a very common one that I look for is, where is it? Not quick encounter building. Core adventure generators is a very common one. So this one actually has some Markdown plugin tools so that you can actually roll on these. I don't have those plugins installed, but I can see the lists right here. I've got my quest list, I've got my monuments and items list, and all of this is available inside Obsidian for me, which means it's much easier for me to go find this stuff and use it than it is to monkey around inside of a PDF. So that is an example. We also have the LazyGM monster reference document available, and that is available at the same place. So, for example, we have the quick use monsters. We of course have the build a monster table in here. The table rendered is not great, but the general use combat stat blocks are here. So we have general use combat stat blocks that you can drop into your game that have very, very basic stat blocks for different challenge ratings that you can drop in and then customize and make your own custom monsters very easily. So all of that is available under these Markdown versions of the LazyGM reference documents that are available on slyflourish.com. So what other ones? Well, then I was like, there's a lot of other stuff that's available out there, and some of it isn't in Markdown yet, but I can make it in Markdown. And an example was I did some work over for Open5e to help take the monsters from Kobold Press's Black Flag system reference document. And it occurred to me that I could take the Black Flag monsters and put them into one big file. So I have a Black Flag monsters reference document here where all of the monsters that are in the Black Flag, which is the Tales of the Valiant system reference document, are available in here. If I want a Balor, I can do a search for Balor, and I can find the Balor stat block, again, right in it. You may be tempted to want to drop all of the monster stats as their own individual Markdown files. What I found is that actually slows down Obsidian. So I kind of like having it just in one single file and then searching for that single file. But that way I've got everything in here. I want a Lich, I can just do a search for Lich, and I have the Lich stat block from Black Flag, right? So that's all available. And again, a single file. So where do you find that? Well, you can find that on my own GitHub repo. So I have on GitHub a LazyGM Tools GitHub repo where I've posted a lot of different stuff. And an example of one of the stuff that I did is I posted this Black Flag Monsters Markdown document under license from the orc license. The license is at the bottom of the file, and it has a Markdown version of all of the monsters. You can go straight to the raw version, which shows the Markdown, and it's one big document, right? And it's all formatted in Markdown. And you can grab that and drop that into a text document and drop it right into you can drop it into Notion, you could drop it into Obsidian, but here's a nice, easily formatted, easily transferable, easily converted version of all of the monsters that are available under Kobold Press's Black Flag, which are really excellent monster designs. Another example, so recently, Level Up Advanced 5e, all of the system reference documents for that, so EN Publishing released a ton, almost basically everything of Level Up Advanced 5e is available under a Creative Commons license and had been locked up in PDFs. I was able to convert that stuff into Markdown files. So here is a lot of the core stuff from the 3 main books of Level Up Advanced 5e in Markdown as well. And one of the ones that I really love is the exploration the exploration chapter, which it's some of the best exploration rules I found in 5e overall. And it includes all the different kinds of journeys, journey activities, roles for the characters when they're going on these journeys. And then it's got these regional encounter tables in here. And all of these, I actually went through a fair bit of work to convert all of these encounter tables. And they're not perfect either. Some of them are kind of messed up, but they'll do the job. All of these encounter tables in Markdown in a nice list so that they look even better on a mobile device are available here. So if you're ever looking for random encounter tables, and again, all of this is released under a Creative Commons license. So if you wanted to put this in another product, you can. If you want to share this with other friends, you can. If you want to transform it in other works, you can. Make sure to reference it. They do use a Creative Commons attribution license, so you have to attribute it back to Level Up Advanced 5e. Very easy to do so. And you have that there too. And I also took the Level Up Advanced 5e Monstrous Menagerie monsters, which were available under Creative Commons, and made a single file for that as well. It's a great big file because it's a lot. You can see how long it's taken to load. So now we have also Level Up Advanced 5e versions of monsters that are available in Markdown in a single file that you can drop right into Obsidian and do a search and find and say, I want to find the Lich. There's the Lich, right? And so now you have two different versions of the Lich. If you want the more spellcasty type, you get the more spellcasty type from Level Up Advanced 5e. If you want the more like direct damage version of the Lich, you can use the one from Black Flag. Both of them are available under a Creative Commons so this one is available under a Creative Commons license. Black Flag is available under the Orc license. Both of them are available in Markdown, which means you can take them and you can drop them into Obsidian. And then you've got a ton of monsters in your Obsidian notebook, saved locally on your system, so that you don't have to worry about the site being up. You could be in airplane mode on your phone. You could be in a convention where it doesn't work, and you have all that stuff available to you sitting on it. Or the websites go down, or God knows what kind of crazy AI stuff Microsoft decides to do with GitHub. You still have your local copies of this that you can use and use legally because they're available under that license. And that's not all. We also have... So that's the Level Up Advanced 5e system reference document is there. The Black Flag, I don't have the rest of Black Flag in Markdown. I only have the monsters in Markdown. If some enterprising person wanted to convert the rest of it to Markdown, that would be totally awesome, but it looked like a lot of work and I didn't really have the time. But I also have the original WotC 5.1 system reference document, the entire thing in Markdown. So because they released that 2 years ago under a Creative Commons license, it means we have, and I actually went and found somebody else had done this on GitHub. I just forked it over to mine. And that's why it has these things like section dwarf in there, because I guess it can build like a table of contents from it. But this is the original 5.1 SRD published by Wizards of the Coast back in 2016 that has all that as well. And it's also got a Lich. Right? We have another Lich stat block. So that way we have 3 different Lich stat blocks that we can use. The original one, these are linked. What happens in the link? Oh, look, they're internally linked. Wow, that's really cool. So this one's even more usable. We can say, I want to do disintegrate, and you click, and there's the disintegrate spell. So if you want the original, like 2014 D&D, which is the 2016 system reference document, and contains all the original D&D 2014 material, not all of it, but it contains all the stuff that they released under a Creative Commons license. You can get that in a single Markdown file that you can drop into your Obsidian notebook and view and keep forever in a format that's really easy for you to use. So here's the example of all of this stuff inside my Obsidian notebook. I've got the 5.1 SRD in here, right? I can do my same thing of, I'll do a search for Lich. Who doesn't love Liches? So here's the Lich stat block from the 5.1 SRD. I wonder what happened if you click the link here. Yeah, these links don't work. Oh, no, they do work. Yeah, cool. So even the links work. So that's the original 5.1 SRD in case I want that. But then I also have the Level Up Advanced 5e version. I can go to the monsters here. I can search on that. But I can also, those exploration things, I can look at that. I have that all handy. Again, not perfect, like the formatting isn't 100%, but it's pretty good. I have the Black Flag monsters are in here. So having all of these system reference document level stuff is really handy because it's like the entire 5e rule set from multiple publishers in local versions that are all viewable in a tool that I can look at on my desktop, but also on my phone. So between Obsidian and the Markdown versions of these, there's a lot going on. And then of course you get these other tools like the Dread Laronomicon, Dread Thingonomicon, the Lazy GM Monster Doc, Lazy DM Resource Document, all that kind of stuff is available under They're under Creative Commons licenses, but they're also usable. So Dread Layer Nomicon, Dread Thingamicon, you have to go buy them, but when you buy them, you get Markdown versions of it. I had mentioned this, that I'm actually going to put City of Arches. This is the first time that I'm going to have any of my products available in Markdown. Some of it already is because it was converted over, but I'm going to take the City of Arches and create a Markdown version of the City of Arches as well. Everybody that buys the City of Arches, or anybody that backed the Kickstarter that got the PDF of the City of Arches, is going to get a Markdown version of City of Arches that they can drop right into Obsidian to use that. So I'm going to be working on that in the spring. I'm going to wait till we send the PDF off to print, at which point we will probably have hopefully nailed every single typo we have. That way I don't have to keep track of like 12 different versions of it. And I'm going to put that out it's not going to be in Creative Commons. You're going to have to go buy it. But if you buy it, you can take the Markdown version and you can drop it right into your Obsidian notebook. So that's going to be really cool. So there's a lot of neat stuff that's happening with Markdown and with RPG space. I think this is kind of a new area where people are starting to see the actual practical value of having open text-based versions of the RPG products that we're looking at. And I think it's a great way for you as a GM to be able to keep a hold of a lot of digital versions that are easily readable on your phone, but also local, so you know that you will always have them when you need them, whether you're online or offline, or whether the original site changes or whatever, you've got your own copies that you can keep locally. So I think that's really cool. So, and I hope you thought that was an interesting look as well. One other trick. So I've been big into Obsidian. I've been talking a lot about Obsidian. I use Obsidian for my game prep now for all of my games. I've been doing so for a little while, even though I've only recently switched over from Notion to Obsidian in my lazy RPG prep. I've actually been using Obsidian for my other games for about a year, and I really love Obsidian. Obsidian is a really great tool. It's a downloadable tool. It uses your own local repository, so you don't have to worry about a company, like a hosted company, changing it like Notion. Notion's been doing weird stuff. They've been doing a lot. They're real excited about the AI. And I'm kind of like, I think I'm going to move. If you're using Notion and you love it, and I still use Notion for other things, I'm just not using it for my game prep anymore. If you love Notion and you don't want to change, you do not don't take my words as anything for like, oh, you should really switch over from one to the other. I don't believe that. But I know for me, I was totally happy to switch over to Obsidian, and I like it very much. One of the really cool tools that has been released for Obsidian that I think is very useful for us RPG folks is the Web Clipper. The Web Clipper can take web pages that you're on and convert them into Markdown and drop them into Obsidian. I use Firefox as my browser, and so there's a Firefox plugin from Obsidian for the Web Clipper, and when you click on it, you get a bunch of different options of what things you can do that can basically take the HTML of the page you're looking at and save the Markdown version into a Clipper folder inside your Obsidian directory. I will give an example of that, which I will do it for my own stuff. So we're going to Sly Flourish, and we're going to go to that lazy GM resource document. This is obviously kind of a useless use case because it's already available in Markdown, but I'm just going to show you how it works. So here is a big page of stuff, and you're like, what would be better? Here, I'll give you another example. I had this article on dreadful blessings, right? I have an article about dreadful blessings, and it talks about when and where to use them and how to use them. And you decide, what? I really want to add that to my own library of useful RPG tools. I want to just have a section in there, almost like I'm building my own book about useful things that I found on the web that I want to drop into my game. You can do this here. So you go to the Dreadful Blessings website, you click on the Web Clipper, and the Web Clipper converts it all to Markdown and has a very simple Add to Obsidian button. You click Add to Obsidian, and now we will go back to our Obsidian directory here. And we have a clippings directory, right? A new added clippings directory. And in that clippings directory, you can see Dreadful Blessings. And in here is a full copy of the text. And you say I don't need this other, more stuff. We're going to edit that, right? And you can see it's all in Markdown. But I don't need any of this because that was all stuff for the article. And you don't need the title necessarily. And we have here a full copy of the document. This is actually the Markdown version. You want to have a readable version. You have the readable version of the document. And now it's saved locally. You've got the text version of it saved as a file on your local file system, which you could then cloud share on your own and internally. You don't have to worry about the website staying up. You don't have to worry about anything changing on the website. You've got your local copy. You don't have to worry about, again, if you're sharing all of your stuff among different setups, you could be in airplane mode on your phone, and that way you can view that article on your phone. So that Web Clipper is a super valuable tool for downloading HTML versions of web pages and saving them to your local Obsidian directory. I'm showing it here with articles, but you can use it on other stuff as well to save local copies of stuff that you might only be able to get remotely. So I would check that out. It's a very cool feature of Obsidian. Notion has the same thing. I haven't tried the Notion version, but Notion also has like a web clipper where you can save whatever web page you're on and save it locally. That could be really useful for situations where there are things that you like that you wish you had a downloadable copy so that you could have your own copy to keep. That is a way to do it. That is the Obsidian Web Clipper. Very valuable tool. Yesterday, I got kind of excited. I had a day off, and on my day off, sometimes I get an idea for a project, and I ran with it. And my good friend Scott Gray lamented the fact that Wizards of the Coast used to have a really fun, lightweight dice roller app on the D&D website. That website is gone, along with millions of words of D&D that used to be up and available are gone. This gets into that example. This is a little related to other things I've been talking about today. We should not forget that Wizards of the Coast only ever looks now and in the future. They don't look back. They rarely look back. And what that means is they have a tendency of killing things that they had up and online before. For example, go find me the 4th edition character builder on the D&D website. You cannot. There is no character builder. People had it. It used to exist. It used to be a feature that you had. It's gone. Another feature that's gone is their very simple and lightweight dice roller app that they used to have, where you could go in and you could say the number of dice and you could roll and you got to roll. Very straightforward, required no login. It was actually, I think, made during the 3rd edition era. And it was a really cool dice loader. So my friend Scott was like, man, it's a real bummer that used to be around and it's not around anymore. And I was like, you know what? I want to solve this problem. So I created the free dice roller. The dice roller is a super simple HTML, JavaScript, cascading style sheet web app that lets you roll dice. It doesn't have fancy 3D rollable dice. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles and gewgaws and doodads. Its intention is to give you a very simple dice roller that you can just run. And so you can just hit a D20 and it just gives you D20s. It keeps a log of about the last whatever. Thanks to some feedback, it put it right up at the top. And you've got it there, super fast, super lightweight. You want to roll a D6, you can roll some D6s. I added a couple of features that the original dice roller app had. So let's say you want to do your 8D6 fireball. You hit dice, you hit 8, you hit 6, and now it does an 8D6 fireball. It also shows you what the individual die rolls were of each of the dice that you have. If you want to roll like one of those 24D6 breath weapons, bang, you got a 24D6 breath weapon, 88, 82, and so on. If you want to roll, for example, a D20 plus 5, you can do one dice with a mod of plus 5, and it does 1D20 plus 5 and shows you what the answer is for that. If you want to roll custom dice, for example, I have it default to a D3. So if you want to roll a D3, this still has the mod. We'll get rid of the mod. All right, you're going to roll a D3 and get a simple D3. If you have weird ones like a 14 and you want to roll a D14, you can do that. You want a D23. You've got your D23. So you can actually roll any number of any sided dice with this tool. You can clear your history, of course. It is designed to be mobile friendly, so it works well on your phone. It's also designed to be downloadable. So it's a single HTML file called diceroller.html that has all the JavaScript and all the CSS and all the HTMLs inside of it. So you can download that copy and it will execute on your local machine as well. And I released it under a CC0 license as well. I was inspired by Kevin Crawford releasing Worlds Without Number under CC0. The rules were... So I said, I want to release something under CC0 too. I'm excited. And I want to give it away so that nobody even needs to mention me, but they can still use this Dice Roller app. If you want to make an app for the iPhone, if you want to make an Android app with it, if you want to embed it in some other tool, you totally can. It only took me a couple hours to put together and a bunch of testing and little things like that. And I've been playing with it a lot. It's also available on GitHub. So if you go to GitHub, you can see it. And here's the Dice Roller HTML. Again, very simple Dice Roller, single file, and works really well. A neat feature that I figured out, it's just fun to roll dice. Look at that. So I'm going to start using this from now on. I didn't realize I needed one until I got one. And again, really super simple. No heavy graphic use of fancy ass 3D rendered dice rolling around on your screen. There are other ones that'll do that. There's a million dice apps on various app stores that are all trying to one up each other on all the features they have. I'm trying to go the other direction. And what are the bare minimum number of features that you need in order to have a useful dice roller? And I think that original D&D dice roller that they used to have did all of this. And only did this. And I think that this is really the stuff that I want and that I need for the Dice Roller app that I've got. One little trick I found out on the iPhone. So I use an iPhone. And on the iPhone, Safari will not load a local web page. If you download or stick on your files the HTML page, it won't download. But Edge on the iPhone will. The Microsoft Edge browser on the iPhone can load local web pages. You can basically go to the share on your iPhone and share a local HTML file with Edge, and it will open up and execute in Edge. That sounds complicated. The advantage of that is that means if you've got this downloaded on your phone as a HTML file, you can then be in airplane mode, or this happens. Like regularly I go to conventions where the bandwidth is shit. And if the bandwidth is terrible, or I don't have any connection or whatever, then all the online tools in the world aren't going to help me. And I don't have any of them. So downloadable tools can. And a downloadable HTML file that I can then load into Edge means I have a dice roller I can use on my phone where I don't have to be connected to the internet. Now, of course, any one of those other dice roller apps can do the same thing because they're almost all local as well. But I want to make one really simple. So if some enterprising person out there wanted to take the code for this and build an app that's available in the App Store, let me know about it, because I would totally love to have an app in the App Store that I could download that has this functionality into it. Very flexible, very easy to use, and designed to just get you the straight thing. And again, given to you for free under a Creative Commons Zero license. You are free to do anything in the world you want to do with it. You want to make a multi-million-dollar, if you want to use this as the core of your next billion-dollar video game, please enjoy. That is the Dice Roller app. You'll find a link to that, of course, all in the show notes. So last week, I dove deep into the Game Master's Guide for Tales of the Valiant, and I kind of covered the entire book from top to bottom, but I didn't really focus on the specific things that I felt like I wanted to focus on. So I'm going to start a new series where we're going to look at all of the Game Master Guides that are available for 5e, not all of them, but I'm going to look at the big four, which is the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, Level Up Advanced 5e's Trials and Treasure, and the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide. And we're going to look at like what sections of those books are particularly useful for you as a GM to prep and run your game. So I had mentioned before that the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, is an excellent source to help new DMs get a handle around what it means to be a Dungeon Master. I think it does a good job at that. A lot of people agree that is really where that book hits its sweet spot. A bigger question is, what are the elements of the book that we're going to find ourselves regularly using? Like, what are the parts of the book that we would want to go back to regularly when we're prepping our game? One of the problems with the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide was that a lot of people kind of set it aside and never really dug into it. So a long time ago, and actually I've updated it since, but a long time ago, I wrote an article called The Gems of the D&D Dungeon Master's Guide. And this is of the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide that came out in 2014. What were the elements of it that I thought were particularly useful that are easy to overlook? Things that could actually help you with your game. I will link to that down in the show notes. And it talks a lot about like DM advice stuff, the tools and inspiration, useful tables. There's a lot of stuff that's in here where I felt like there's good parts in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide that can help us prepare and run our games if we know that they're there and if we are reminded of them. I wanted to do the same thing. It's still early yet because on the Dungeon Master, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide has only been around now for a little while, but I spent some time. I actually took my copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide. So a keynote, two important qualifiers. One is Wizards of the Coast did send me a preview copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide, a review copy of it, and I also have free access to it on D&D Beyond because I wrote for D&D Beyond. Those are important considerations when you're hearing me talk about these books. I still like to think I give a pretty decent, fair review. Anyway, I spent some time. Listen to that. You hear that sound? That's all the tabs that I put into this book because I sat down with it. I spent a couple of hours going through it and I looked at all of the sections of this book that I thought were particularly useful that you may want to go back to. The kind of sections in this book that you might want to regularly go back to and look at for prep, to run, or to inspire you. This is going to be a future article that I publish on Sly Flourish, but I wanted to talk about it here. And we're going to look at some of these sections on D&D Beyond because it's easier to look up these things on D&D Beyond than it is to view in a book. So in chapter 2, under running exploration, there is weather tables that are kind of make it easy for you to roll some dice to figure out what the weather is like while they're traveling. And then there's this travel terrain table. And the travel terrain table has various types of terrain: Arctic, coastal, desert, forest, grassland, hills, mountain, swamp, underdark, urban, and waterborne. Maximum pace that you can travel there. The distance that you might see an encounter at, like the distance at what point you might run into an encounter. And then I like these, which are foraging DCs, navigation DCs, and searching DCs. Those foraging, navigation, and search, that actually starts to get into the idea of the roles that the characters can fulfill while they're traveling, which is something that I don't think the book does a really good job of clarifying. Other ones do. But the DC listing here is particularly useful. So that's a good table. I don't know if that is in the dungeon. I don't know if that's in the Dungeon Master's screen or not. I have a copy of the screen, but I don't have it in front of me. So I don't know if that's on the screen itself, but that's a useful page to reference. One of the things I think you could do is when you have your physical copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide is put little markers on these pages and maybe, write in a little thing so that you can easily reference this stuff from the Dungeon Master's Guide at the table. Because one thing, the Dungeon Master's Guide serves these different purposes. One is to teach new DMs and describe to new DMs what it's like to DM. A lot of it is descriptions on things that you can do when you're actually running the game. And then there's a lot of these like referencey sort of things that you're going to want to look at while you're actually running the game. And sometimes it can be hard to navigate all that. I think that might have been one of the tricky bits of the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, was that it was hard to navigate kind of all the sections that were in there and know what sections you actually wanted to look at. The dungeon table available that's on page 65. And this is where we got into the DM toolbox section. And I think the dungeon table with dungeon quirks, a big table of what are different kinds of dungeon quirks. I think the various states of ruin, the kinds of conditions. I think this is kind of a fun table, and it's one of these tables that you can kind of roll on to give yourselves ideas about what you're looking at. So I think that is a neat section that's easy to miss, is this dungeon quirks section. It's kind of weird to call it quirks. I guess they didn't know what else to call it, but it's various characteristics of the different kinds of dungeons that you can find. That's a pretty notable and useful section. Hazards further on. Hazards was another one recommended by patrons of Sly Flourish over on our Discord server. A whole bunch of different kind of interesting things that the characters might run into. Everything from green slime, fireball fungus is kind of a new fun one. Different things to make it interesting and notable while traveling through a dungeon or traveling through any area. A whole bunch of different kinds of hazards. This is sort of a useful thing to read through, remember that you have it, maybe mark it in your book so that when you want to fill out a dungeon with interesting things to explore, you can drop some of these hazards in. You can also use these as models for other specific hazards to drop in your game. When you understand how these work and how they're kind of written and designed, you can start to think about designing your own that fit that system. So the hazard section is definitely a useful area. Running mobs on page 82. Mobs. So how to run lots of monsters. The approach that they have in here and the table that you have here of how many monsters can succeed out of what number of monsters based on what the die roll is that they need to do is a pretty useful table. And, if you didn't have anything else, I think this would be a fine way to do it. There's two things missing. I'm not being critical about it, but I think there's two things missing that are worth mentioning. One is, if you want to be a lazy GM, there's an easier approach, which is start by assuming 1/4 of them succeed. Right? Whenever you have a big pile of monsters that are rolling a bunch of attack rolls or rolling a bunch of saving throws, a really easy way is just assume that 1/4 of them succeed or fail. If you have other conditions at play that make you think it is more than that or less than that, for example, if they would have advantage on the check, or if somebody's just really, really good at it, then you can, of course, reduce or increase that number of successes. But if you start by saying you're going to assume 1/4 of them succeed, it's a really good rule of thumb that you don't have to look anything up in a table to do. The other thing that this doesn't do is describe how to manage hit points for lots and lots of monsters. If you're running 30 or 40 monsters in a battle, tracking the hit points of 30 or 40 different monsters will quickly drive you mad. So an easier way to handle it is instead have a thing that I call the damage. And the way you handle the damage tally is you track the damage done to any monster in that horde in one tally. And whenever that tally reaches the hit points of one of those monsters, you remove a monster from play. Whatever the last monster was that got hit, you remove them from play. This is an idea I got from 13th Age by Jonathan Tweed and Rob Hainso. They had those ideas ideas as a house rule for 3rd edition of D&D, I think, like that. But it's a very easy approach for managing lots of hit points. You basically keep track of all of the hit points of all of those monsters in one tally. One trick I have is you can round it to the nearest 5. So instead of having monsters with 17 hit points, you do 15 hit points or 10 hit points. That way it's a lot easier to see, like when multiple monsters die because a whole group gets fireballed. You can figure that out. That's also, if you're handling fireball, you count the number of monsters that got hit by the fireball. You then multiply that by the number of monsters that got hit. You multiply the amount of damage done by the number of monsters hit, get that number, and then figure out how many monsters would have died taking that amount of damage and remove all those monsters from play. An easier way is just have them all die, or have 3/4 of them die, right? You assume they fail the saving throw, you remove them. Some way of managing hit points is something that the DMG doesn't have. It's available in Lazy DM's Companion. We have it in Forge of Foes. It's available on the Lazy GM reference document. There are different ways to handle tracking hit points for lots and lots of monsters. Something not described in here. But this table is not a bad table if you want to be a little bit more nitpicky about how many monsters should have succeeded on a die roll when you have a lot of them. This is not a bad way to go. Common names. We always need names. This is under, I think, the NPCs section. Names are important, and there's a lot of good names in this book. It doesn't overwhelm you with names. I might have used a little bit more, could have used a few more names, but this is probably enough. It's enough that you're unlikely to run out of names. I usually have like a giant table of names that I keep in whatever notebook I've got, so I always have names that I can quickly go and reference. This isn't bad. Another one that's probably worth tabbing in your notebook, put a little, or in your Dungeon Master's Guide, is, hey, where are these sections on random names? Poisons. Poisons are useful for a few reasons. One is you can, of course, apply them to monsters or you can apply them to monsters. You can make them an environmental effect, but you can also treat them as rewards. I'm sure GMs have already figured this out. You can give these away as rewards. They could find a little bit of a poison. I did this for one of my players the other day, and he was really excited about the 2 different poisons that he was able to pick up from his friendly alchemist who said, hey, I'd really like to move into your place and work on your gardens for you as a welcoming gift. In the reverse, I'm bringing you these 2 poisons. And he's like, oh, thank you, poisons, perfect. And he put them in his bag for later. So it's really cool to look at these poisons. And again, you can use these as models to kind of make your own poisons. But I think that's a pretty good one. Settlements on page 93. Settlements have a lot of good random tables in here for things like what are the defining traits of a settlement, what are the claim to fames of a settlement, what are the current calamities, who are the local leaders. I love tavern names. Tavern name generators, it's something I don't have in any of my books, and I kind of wish I did, is this idea of tavern names, and there's a good set of tavern names in here. And then what are the random shops that you have? So again, good tables, good random lists of the kinds of things that you would want to have for generating a settlement or a town. If it's your starter, really good for your starter town. When you're about to start a new campaign, you want to have a town. This is a good way to do it. And I like these sort of defining traits. There could have been more fantastic features. And that's something that we have in the Lazy DM's Companion is a fantastic features. I think the workbook has it. Lazy DM's workbook has a fantastic features that you can drop into your settlement so that it makes it really unique among all of the settlements that you've got. But that's a good one. Supernatural Gifts is a handy table of different things that you can give to players that aren't just rewards. Some of them are temporary and some of them are permanent. You can kind of decide if you want to make them temporary or permanent, but it's kind of a neat way for a character to get a reward that's sort of a blessing of the god or a blessing of a primordial, a blessing of a region or a patron or something. Some other way that they can receive a tangible mechanical reward that isn't based on getting a new magic item. Pretty handy way to do it. And charms are sort of things that you get for a certain amount of time. Blessings are things that you get permanently. Good list of stuff, and again, good models. Traps. Again, handy to read through to look at what traps you have available for you. Also useful as models to kind of custom build your own traps. One fun bit I like to do is mix 2 traps together. If you put up a section, you want to make it really interesting, find 2 different traps, mash them together into one bigger complicated trap, makes things really exciting. Adventure situations. So there's a whole set of, in the creating adventures section. And where do we have? And we have a table of different adventuring situations, and these are broken out by tier. So you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and 4. Tier 3 and 4 have fewer situations. This is useful for a couple different reasons. One is it's useful because, like, if you need an idea for a hook for an adventure that you want to run, you could do far worse than going here and rolling a couple of times or reading through them and getting some ideas. But also, a very important aspect of this is it shows you what kind of adventures are appropriate for the different levels of characters. Something I think that we miss, and I've seen seen products and stuff like that miss this idea, is the idea that any adventure can really work for any character. You could have, universe-changing adventures for level 1, and you could have rats in a basement for level 20. I actually think that's true about the rats in the basement for level 20, but, that's just me. But I think it really helps to understand what kind of adventures make sense for the different levels of characters. And I think this table does a really, really good job of this. This adventure situation by level table that's available in the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's a good one. Common map symbols. A lot of Game Master's Guides have this. The Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide has this as well. The original Dungeon Master's Guide has it. I really think it's useful to have a key of very simple shapes that you can draw when you're hand drawing maps for your players at the table, so that people understand what a statue is like, or what a door is like, or what a pit trap is like, or what stairs going up and down are like. I think these are really useful symbols, and I think it's worth your time to sit down and practice them. Right? Sit down, draw these out. Get used to drawing maps using these symbols. They're very common symbols. It means if your players are going from game to game, they'll recognize these symbols. They're also really easy to draw, but they're still very descriptive in the kinds of things they draw. So I really like that. One thing I think is missing from this, which is unfortunate because it was done by the same guy. So Chris Perkins wrote a lot of this book, and Chris Perkins had a really, really good article called Map Foo, where he talked about how to draw other things on maps when you're hand drawing maps, simple ways of drawing maps. I wish he had put more of that into this book. I think it would have been really useful. It's not. And unfortunately, because Wizards love to kill their old stuff, you can no longer find a copy of the Map Foo article on wizards.com. You now have to go to the Internet Archive, or there's some people that captured them in a PDF and stored them somewhere. It's a mess, but it was a really good article. So you should probably go hunt for it. And that was called Map Foo by Chris Perkins, one I really, really liked. And I think they could have added more of that stuff into this section of the book. Would have been useful. Adventure hooks. So there's a whole section on different kinds of adventure hooks, patron hooks, supernatural hooks, happenstance hooks, good ways to kind of think about how the characters get a hold of a hook. So this isn't about the hooks themselves. This is about the way they receive a hook. This is also really useful as ways to receive secrets and clues. Information the characters need in order to progress could come to them by any of these means. Vivid dreams, fortune teller reading, animals or animated objects speaking suddenly clearly, finding a letter. These are all great ways to reveal secrets and clues. I would recommend that. Oh yeah, Scipio reminds me that JP Covert has a wonderful zine about how to draw maps. I'm going to link to that because that's far easier to find than Chris Perkins' Map Foo. It should have been the kind of thing in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's really good. That's JP Covert's work for building maps. Fantastic little booklet. I love it. The XP budget per character. We've talked a lot about this. So this is the new encounter building system for 2024 D&D. I think, of course, the lazy encounter benchmark for me is an easier system to use. This is so much easier, though, than it was in 2014 D&D, and I think it probably works mostly fine. And it's one single table. Of course, you want to bookmark this table in your book so that it's easy for you to figure it out. I think it does require a little too much math, so it's not quite as easy to easily benchmark an encounter. You kind of have to go through a process of adding up all the experience point values of all of the monsters to see how difficult an encounter is going to be, or use it like a budget to buy experience. I don't know why it wasn't challenge rating based. I think doing it challenge rating based is an easier system, but here we are. There's a reason why they didn't. I talked about that in another show. Still, it's a table you're probably going to want to bookmark. There's a section on monster behavior, initial attitudes, the monster's personality, and monster relationships. Good ways to kind of shake up a traditional encounter where it's you facing a bunch of monsters and just fighting. This way you can roll on a few dice, you can sort of change the encounter, and it gives you ideas about building out an interesting situation involving that monster rather than just you go, are they being defensive for a reason? Are they cowardly and easily surrender? What kind of attitude do they have? I think there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with these pretty simple tables. This could probably be expanded a little bit, but I think it works out. The treasure hoard tables. The treasure hoard tables, definitely something you want to bookmark. And I think actually it's a very simple system. The way that they've handled rolling randomly for treasure is a very simple system, and I kind of like it because it's very simple. And it does something in particular I like, which is it's session-based rewards. It's not based on number of adventures. It's not based on level ranges. It's a session-based reward system. And it tells you right up front exactly how much money you should expect to give out and how many magic items you can roll on. And then you can use other tables to kind of break those things down into specific kinds of treasure parcels and stuff like that. I think it works really well. The idea that they managed to capture everything in like a 5-line table is really pretty cool. So that's definitely one that you're going to want to benchmark. So chapter 6 on the cosmology is like a miniature manual of the planes stuck into the Dungeon Master's Guide. And I really like this section for one big reason. This is where you really get to dive deep into the lore of D&D and let it seep into your skin and into your blood so that you can bring this information out when the characters are running through your adventures. This is where we see a lot of inspirational fiction, inspirational art, and stuff that really gives us an idea of like what D&D feels like from the planes perspective. And it's not just the idea that the characters are going to go explore the planes. First level characters can learn about the planes. They can get information about the lore. They can see mosaics on walls or read old books. There's lots of ways to use the information you get in this section of the book throughout your entire game. There's a few highlights. So I think this entire section is worth reading. It's filled with proper nouns. It's filled with lots of interesting lore. It's very inspirational. It's a really good way. And the idea that like you're basically getting a small manual of the planes stuck inside your Dungeon Master's Guide makes it a really good value as well. I highly like it. It talks all about this stuff. And again, the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide had this as well. But one of the sections that I really liked is this Planar Adventure Situations table, where it kind of tells you about what are the kinds of adventures that characters might get into that touch on the planes. Some of these are clearly planar-based adventures, but some of them are just ways that the planes sort of leak into adventures that you'd have in your own world. So I think that really works. But then this entire tour of the multiverse section, where it goes dives into them, talks about the different levels of the abyss and who resides there and what's going on there. Really good lore, good deep lore that's available in this book and easily overlooked because you're just interested in mechanics and treasure and stuff like that. So don't miss it. Sit down and read that section. It's fun to read and it'll tell you a whole lot. Magic Item Special Features. This was a set of tables that was also in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide and really inspired a lot of work that I did in Lazy DM's Companion and other places to fill out details of magic items and even other things, monuments, single-use magic items, weird individual items that they pick up, small things, like that idea of like the pocket trash that characters have. You can use these tables and tie it to them. For example, who are the creators? This is a great list of the different sort of species that might have been involved in creating monuments or small magic items or small trinkets or other things. You can use these tables to add flavor to all of them. And the big ones are the creator and the creator, fiends, fae, elf, who made it, the history, right? Arcane, bane, heroic, ornamental, prophecy, religious. This gives you ideas. And then you have these sort of like minor and major, you have these minor properties and minor quirks, which are interesting ways to kind of shake that up. I think these tables are really useful. I use them a lot in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. I think they're very valuable in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. Again, stick a bookmark in that one because it is a very useful section of the book. Of course, the random magic item tables. So I think it's really interesting that the random magic item tables are kind of broke down into these arcana, armaments, implements, and relics, but they are also broken down by commonality, common, uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary, and so on. And I think it's a pretty easy way. You can use these tables in lots of different ways. You can just roll randomly, like first roll a d4 to pick which table you're gonna work on, decide what the rarity of the item is, and then roll on the table to see what you get. I think that is a fine way to go, but you can also kind of cherry pick stuff and say, I definitely want to have an armament now, so we're going to roll in the armaments table. So I'm kind of digging how these things are broken out, and particularly what's useful is that you get broken out by sort of the item type and then the rarity. Gives you a good cross section of the type of item that you're gonna find. So I do find that the random magic item tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide very, very useful. Bookmark it and use it to augment. I still think for me the ideal treasure giving approach is you find specific magic items that your characters are really going to love, and then you give those out relatively rarely, but you augment them with lots of random rolls on magic items to give them interesting things that none of you guys could have expected that you were going to get. I think it's a good approach, and I'm glad they have a good random magic item section in here. One thing to note is at the end of it's easy to miss it because they're at the end of the magic item list instead of ahead of it. It's really weird that they did it that way. They flipped it from the way the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. The random magic item tables are after the magic items are in the book, but you're gonna want to bookmark that section. It's a useful one. Maps. The last section I wanted to talk about are maps. There are a whole pile of Dyson logo maps at the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Really good maps that cover a very wide range of the different types of common dungeons you would use in your Dungeons & Dragons game. Barrows, Caravan Encampment, Crossroads, Dragon's Lair, dungeon hideout, farmsteads, keep, manor, mine, roadside inn, the ship, a spooky house, underdark warren, volcanic caves, and wizard's tower. Here's a dirty trick. You can really use these maps over and over again. Most of the time, your players are not going to recognize that it's the same map you used a year ago or whatever. But if you do, all you have to do is rotate them 90 degrees or flip them horizontally or vertically, or carve off only sections of the map that you want to use. Maybe you only need a small layer, so you take one of these larger layers and you just block off sections of it. Some of these multi-level layers that are in here. Here's a good example of the dungeon hideout. Maybe you only grab that one right-hand section and you have a big collapsed wall so they can't get past it. That way you turn it into an easy, simple 5-room dungeon instead of a bigger one. These maps are really useful, and they're in your book already. So you don't necessarily have to have like a whole separate section of maps. Just bookmark the fact that you got these maps in your Dungeon Master's Guide in your set. I think including these maps, very valuable thing. They included enough maps to cover a wide range of stuff, not so many maps that you're going to forget what you have. So I think that's really good. So those are the sections of the Dungeon Master's Guide, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, I thought were particularly notable and ones that I could see us using and reusing as we're using the book at your table. I think what you can do as a game master and as a D&D dungeon master is go through this book, use little adhesive tabs, and write on those tabs what they are, and tab your book so that when it's sitting next to you at the table, you can quickly go find the sections of the book that you find most useful for you to be able to run your game. Every month on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we cover questions from patrons. Patrons can ask any question they want, and every Friday I answer those questions on Patreon. Some of those questions I bring here to the show so we can dive in a little deeper. The first question is from Luztak, who says, "Hello, Mike. I have a question about open sandbox-esque campaigns. When and how do they end? Not talking about TPKs or them just fizzling out. I mean giving them a satisfactory conclusion. Some context. I'm preparing my next campaign, Star Wars Edge of the Empire, for my group. The idea is for them to be very open and player-driven. The setting and system really help in this. Star Wars is well known. PCs have a starship, letting them go almost anywhere, and the obligation mechanics are awesome and have the PC backstories come to haunt them. I have a very good group of players. Most of them are GMs as well, and some are hardcore Star Wars fans. Personally, I have a fair amount of GM experience, but I never ran a sandbox-style campaign before. I have no doubts the campaign will lift off right away for some awesome games, and I'm really excited on the idea, but running a more emergent game and flex my improvisation muscles. But my question is, how will or should this end? The answer is, don't worry about the ending. If you don't know where even if it's not a sandbox game, even if you're running a somewhat structured game where you know that there are going to be quests given to the characters are going to follow those quests, it still can help you to not have a really good idea where it's going to end. You don't necessarily need to know where it's going to end. You still have drivers that are moving the game forward. You still have these ideas of like villains and fronts that are moving things forward. So there's still an empire doing empire stuff. There's still a main bad guy doing main bad guy stuff. But you don't necessarily have to know where it's going to go. And that's the one of the muscles to improve is not to flex it, but to relax it. If we're going to use this muscle metaphor, relax the muscle of trying to control where things are going to go. And instead, worry about where your next game is going to go. I recommend this anyway. I recommend this for all styles of games. But that idea of like, you really want to focus on the next session you're going to run and the hooks to run the session after that. And really, you don't need to worry about where it's going to go long term, right? You can have vague ideas. You can see the hazy mountains on the horizon, but you're not writing a path to go there yet. You're not sure which set of mountains you're going to get to. You don't even know those. Maybe there's those clouds. They could not be mountains. So I think it's really a matter of, just focusing on the game that's in front of you. And it's a big one I recommend anyway, focusing on the game that's in front of you. What's the next game that's going on? Who are the villains that are going to be there? What's the situation that's going on? And what are the things that are going to lead to the next part? What are the hooks to kind of give them an idea about where they can go after that? Even in a sandbox game of just saying, there are 3 other planets that are nearby. Do you want to explore any of those, right? And the only key, I think, for a sandbox game, and I've talked about this before, is if you want to put those options in front of the players at the end of a session so that you know what to prep for the session after that. Try to give the options at the end. And that's why I say you got to kind of prepare enough to give the hooks for the next session, because you want to know where they're going to go if you're going to have that option. And usually what I find is like every 2 or 3 sessions is when you have to do that, because usually any given adventure could run 2 or 3 sessions. But good question. Ben H says, my local game shop has a TV with a structure around it that allows it to be used as a digital map screen for in-person play. I think online play has an advantage on the map side, and this bridges the gap somewhat. Have you had any experience with a digital map in person? And if so, any tips? The only thing I've used, so I've seen people with TVs that are kind of embedded in their table. It's really cool, but it can also, there's a lot of complications with stuff like that. There's a lot of like getting the machines hooked up and making sure that everything's working right. It's not always perfect. I do have a big monitor that sits up in my game room that I think I've used twice. And then instead I just draw the maps out on the table. I really like just drawing maps. I like the tactile feedback. So no, the answer is I don't have experience. I know many people that do. I know that, yes, there is this idea of like being able to put really rich maps. In some cases, they're like animated maps or lava's moving and stuff like that. Can definitely be cool. For me, I don't even really use digital maps in my online games. But I think like the question you need to ask yourself is the complication worth the effort? Like, are you getting a benefit from it that is better than the extra effort of setting up a system like that? Or can you get away with a Pathfinder flip mat and a wet erase marker or a Chessex flip mat or Chessex battle mat and drawing out the maps yourself? That's a real question. And I really like the simplicity is what I choose. But I've definitely seen people do this and it certainly works well for them. So I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think with everything we're doing when we're running games, it's ask ourselves, is this really worth the effort that we're putting in? Right? The money, the time, the space, and the effort. Is that effort where it's best placed? I have to ask myself that a lot of things, like Dwarven Forge. But I love my Dwarven Forge. Chris H. says, do you have any advice for bridge sessions? My group and I are on our 5th campaign together, and I noticed that we often have chapters or arcs in our campaigns that take place in one location, call it location A, and then the plot moves to a completely different location, location B. Once my players are in and settled at that location, things run well. However, it's those bridge sessions from location to B, A to B, where our campaign drifts a bit as they travel to and start adventuring to understand the new locale and its inhabitants. Thank you. That could be fine. Right? If it's a little slower, the pacing is a little bit different, I think that could be okay. If you want to kind of make things interesting, what I like to do is between A and B, I like to have an interesting location that they run into along the way. The location could be they learn about a nearby dungeon or old ruin that they could go explore. That's sort of a side quest. It could be a situation that they get into. Usually it's like a monument and then an encounter, so that there's something along the way that's a notable thing that occurs while they're going from point A to point B. That kind of brings things back to the here and now instead of sort of abstracting everything on like a 10-day journey as they go from point A to point B. You could say day 5 of your journey, you run into this long bridge. This bridge covers this massive chasm and there's 2 huge statues that are kind of holding the bases of the bridge, but the statues are crumbling and you wonder about that bridge. By the way, there's goblins on it or whatever, right? So coming up with an interesting encounter along the way can be, for me, a way to kind of bring things back to the focus of where I think D&D and where RPGs tend to work best, which is on the here and now, a situation that's going on, in an actual scene. So that's what I tend to do. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. You can find a link in the show notes. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator PDF, including a mini version of 5e that you can run for you and your friends tonight. And you get a weekly RPG-related article sent to your inbox every Tuesday. You can also support me on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, accessories and resources to help them run their games. They get access to the awesome Discord community and they get access to the Patreon Q&A. Lots of different things you get for being a patron of Sly Flourish. And you can pick up any of my books on the Sly Flourish bookstore. Thank you so much. Have a great day and get out there and play an RPG.